from the Swiss Alps to the Canadian Rockies, celebrating unique connections between Switzerland and Canada. Brought to you by the Swiss representations in Canada.
Bonjour and welcome to our podcast. My name is Sarah Bagdasarians, Project Director at the Consulate General of Switzerland in Montreal. Today, my guest is Holly Cassidy, pen name for international best-selling suspense novels author Hannah Mary McKinnon. So, Hannah Mary, you were born in England, grew up in Switzerland, and now live in Canada. The Christmas Wager was your first novel, writing as Holly Cassidy. You have released your second book, The Christmas Countdown. So please, Hannah Mary, tell us about you and the story behind the festive novel.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. I'm really, really pleased and thrilled to be here. Thank you. So yes, my official name is Hannah Mary McKinnon, née op Planalp. So your very Swiss German name there. I was indeed born in the UK. My mom was English. My dad is Swiss, from Brienz-Wieler. So really nice and really nice and Swiss German. And I lived in Switzerland for a total of 35 years. So a long, long time. A couple of years in England, mainly in Switzerland. And then I met my husband, who's Canadian, in 1999. He moved to Switzerland for 11 years. And then after we had 3 children, we decided to move to Canada, and we've been in the Toronto area ever since. So before coming to Canada, I worked in IT recruitment. I had a job as a CEO of a pan-European recruitment company. And then when we came to Canada, I decided to do something else, and that was when I started writing. So The Christmas Countdown is my second novel as Holly Cassidy, but my 10th novel overall. Most of the others are suspense. So yeah, that's me very, very briefly.
Well, quite a change from IT to novel writing. Was
Yes.
that always a passion?
Not really. It was in school. So I used to love creative writing in school. I loved it. It was fantastic. But then I wanted to go into business, and I never thought that writing would be my career. So I left school. I went to Geneva as an au pair, and then I stayed in Geneva and did my apprentissage commercial in Geneva, or CAFA, for 3 years, worked for Honeywell, stayed in Geneva for a total of 5 years, and then moved to the Neuchâtel area and worked in purchasing, and then ended up in IT recruitment. So no, creative writing was never really on the horizon. But when we came to Canada, I started up my own company in HR, and it failed. It crashed and burned and died, and it was horrible. And I had to do something else. And it was actually my husband who encouraged me to try writing, because I said, I've always thought maybe I could, maybe one day write a novel. And he said, well, why don't you try now and see what happens? And here we are. I've written 10 books. So it's quite an extraordinary change and a really fun one.
You have suspense books, and those are the 2 books that you just released. So how do you come about to from suspense to romantic comedies?
Well, my very, very first book was a romantic comedy, Time After Time. But then after that, I moved over to suspense. I think I was more drawn to it, that the characters are darker, the storylines are grittier. It doesn't necessarily work out for everybody at the end. And I was really drawn to that. But then COVID happened. 2020 happened. My mum passed away in 2020 with the flight bans and travel bans. I couldn't get to Interlaken to see her. And that was a very difficult time. And I was writing a thriller called Never Coming Home, which actually, it's dark and it's gritty and it's all those things, but it's also funny. It's written from the antagonist's point of view, this man who has hired a hitman on the dark web to kill his wife because she's very, very rich, but terribly annoying. And he had this really fun sense of humor. And that was because every day I went into this manuscript and laughed as I was writing it, because everything around me, around everyone, the whole world was horrible. COVID and no vaccines and my mum passing away. And it was just awful. And as I was doing that, I remember thinking that it would be fun to write another romantic comedy. but how and when, and would I tell my agent? And there were so many questions. In the end, I did nothing until, well, I wrote down a few ideas. But then about a year and a half later, she emailed me and said, "Hey, Hannah, have you ever thought of writing a romantic comedy again?" And I said, "Yes, and here are some ideas." So it was very serendipitous, complete coincidence that she asked me. And I was so happy to write something that's light and festive and funny, and full of love and hope and happiness. And then I can go back to my murderous ways and, bad things happening and people either getting away with them or not. So it's been a really nice balance to have the light happiness and then the darker tales as well. So I really enjoy writing both.
I have two questions coming up to my mind as you're
Oh.
as you're telling us about how you came up with writing. The first is how do you find a publisher?
I did things not necessarily the right way around, although I'm not sure there is a right way. So I had decided right from the outset that I wasn't going to self-publish. So self-publishing means you write the book and then you use a program like Smashwords, I think that's still around, and you upload it and make it available to people yourself. Advantage is that you keep most of the cover price, right? That's one of the advantages. Disadvantage is that you'd have to, well, you don't have to, but you could hire an external editor, you have to do the cover, you have to do all of your own promotion and all of your own marketing, which is a job in itself. And I needed to have the validation from an agent and from a publisher that my work was good enough. I didn't have the confidence to say, "Oh yeah, this is great," and throw it up on Smashwords. So I decided to go the traditional route, which means writing the manuscript, sending it to agents, hopefully getting an agent to offer representation, and then the agent takes the manuscript to publishers. In my case, HarperCollins for my thrillers, Penguin Random House for my romantic comedies, and sells them the manuscript. So that was the route that I took. So I made a ton of mistakes on my journey. I wrote my first romantic comedy about a decade ago. I sent it to my mum, who read it. She said, "Oh yeah, this is great." Then I sent it to agents and they said, "Well, actually, no, it's not that great." And I was given some feedback that was really, really helpful. And the main feedback was, it's a good idea, but the execution isn't great. So that meant that I could take the manuscript, deconstruct it. That was when I started taking some creative writing courses. So I reworked the manuscript a number of times and went back out to agents and got an agent who then sold the book. So I think from when I started to submit to agents until I found one, it must have been about 2 years, during which I kept reworking the manuscript because I wasn't ready to throw the idea away. So there are two routes you can take. And for me, the traditional way was always what I wanted to do with the agent and the publisher. So I had the support from the publisher. They do all of the distribution, get it into the bookstores. Of course, I do a lot of promotion as well, but they do a lot of most of the heavy lifting. So, and I just needed an editor, in-house that would say, "Yes, this is good enough to publish." So that was really important to me.
Great. And how do you get your ideas?
Oh gosh, ideas come from the strangest places, I swear. Sometimes they're really spontaneous. I remember for the Christmas wager, thinking about that one and coming up with that one based on a company event that I had in Switzerland, in the Zurich area years and years ago, with farmer games. So we had a corporate event and we went to a farm and we played all of these different games, throwing rubber boots and hammering nails into a big log. It was really fun. It's a team building thing. It was really cool, really fun. So that came from that. But then I've had ideas for thrillers that have come from something I hear on the radio, something I see on TV, two houses on our courtyard going up for sale, and me wondering what might happen if an ex-boyfriend moved in next door, and how complicated that could be. So they come from really different areas. And with the thrillers, typically it's something that I hear is really lovely. And then I think, but what could go wrong? How could this be bad? How could this turn murderous? And with the romantic comedies, it's, oh, how can I build a love story around this? It's so you could take one idea, really, and write both a romantic comedy or a thriller
Mm.
around it, depending on which avenue that you take, good or bad.
Now that you've got 10 books under your belt, how many rewrites does it take to come up with the final edit?
So typically I will outline. So I'm what we call a plotter in the writing world. So I plot and outline and think about my stories, my characters. I build an outline. I build character interviews. That sounds very silly, but it's really what I do. And then I'll write a first draft. I won't even call it a first draft. I will call it a skeleton. And
Mm.
then I go over it again and again, probably 8 or 9 times before I send it to my editor at the publishing company. And then we'll probably go over it anywhere from 4, 5, 6 times again. Each round is smaller and shorter. The first round will be big things, pacing, maybe add another character or take one away or combine. And then at the very end, the proofreading will take me a couple of days, but the first edit with my editor could take a number of weeks, depending how much we tear the manuscript apart. So I think by the time it's published, by the time the book actually comes out, I've probably read it anywhere up to 15 times, at which point I'm ready for another story.
I bet. And then how long would the promotion take?
That's a great question. So it's typically very intense, I'd say the month before the release and
Mm.
then the month after. Although with a holiday book, it's a little bit different because this book, The Christmas Countdown, came out at the end of October. So I wasn't really promoting much, in September. People don't really want to talk about Christmas in September.
Mm.
So it's really been from the release up until Christmas. With the thrillers, yeah, I'd say it's typically 2 to 4 weeks before and 6 weeks afterwards. But there are other things that come in during the year, book clubs or other events, especially because I have a longer backlist now as well that people are interested, hopefully, in picking up.
What would you say is the best way to pick a creative writing class? That is referring to something you said earlier. How did you go about choosing what class you were going to take? And obviously the location, was it online or was it in person?
That's a great question. I did both. When I got a lot of rejection letters from agents, I thought, okay, Hannah Mary, you better take some creative writing classes because you clearly don't know what you're doing or not well enough. So I went online and I started off with a local workshop in Toronto. This is on the Quick Brown Fox blog. The gentleman who runs that is called Brian Henry. And I saw that he did some workshops about getting published, writing for children. There's the dialogue one. I think there was a plotting, pacing, writing suspense one, I think. So I took a number of those. And he also offered weekly critique groups that were in person locally. So I was able to go in every week, and I think it was for 12 weeks. And twice we'd bring in a long piece, 3,000 words, and 8,
Mm.
10 pages, something like that. And then twice during those 12 weeks, we'd bring in, say, 1,000 words, a couple of pages, and read it to a smaller group spontaneously. The other times with the longer pieces, we'd get them ahead of time, a week ahead, and then we'd critique them. And that was really, really helpful. So I did that a number of times. And I also took an online writing course with Curtis Brown. So Curtis Brown is a very large literary agency,
Mm.
and they offer a whole range of writing courses now. I think the one I took was a 6-month online novel writing course. They have shorter ones now. It was fantastic. And that was really instrumental in how I rewrote my first novel. And it was as I was taking that course and rewriting it that I found my agent. So I always credit
Mm.
both of those classes with helping me hone my craft. And I took some other shorter courses online. There's another one that I really like called Plot Stormers, and that is offered by writershq.co.uk in the UK. And I love them. And their logo was, I won't say the full word, stop effing about and start writing. And that made me laugh so much. I thought, okay, they had me at their logo. And what they do is they teach you how to take an idea to a full outline in 6 weeks. If you don't like swearing, don't do that course because the language is colorful, and it made me laugh, so it doesn't bother me at all. But I thought that course was really fun and it was very clear, and I still use their methodology today, breaking down my plots, and I find it a lot easier. So I took a lot of online and in-person courses, and they were really helpful.
About the Christmas countdown, tell us about the book, the Swissness, because there is a lot of it in it.
Yes,
And quite surprisingly,
yes,
it's like
I was so happy to do that. So The Christmas Countdown is a holiday romantic comedy. The main protagonist is called Callie. She's sad. She's down in the dumps because she was dumped. Her ex-boyfriend left her 7 months prior, and she's not in love with him anymore, but she does not want to celebrate Christmas. She's still hurt. She doesn't want to go home for Christmas because her ex-boyfriend will be next door, because their parents live next door to each other, with his brand new girlfriend. So nope, I am not going back for Christmas, she says. So her sister, Anita, is not ready to let her sister give up on life and love quite so easily. So she builds her an advent calendar, and she gifts Callie this advent calendar that is comprised of tasks and treats. So one day she gets a treat, the next day she gets a task that is invariably related to the treat. So hopefully Callie will rediscover her zest for life and Christmas with the help of the calendar and a very handsome baker called Marco, who is probably the spoonful of sugar that Callie needs. So that is the Christmas Countdown. So in terms of the Swissness, I decided from the offset to make Callie half Swiss, like me. Her dad is Swiss, from Interlaken, like my dad. And I wrote a few things in there and sent it to my editors, who are in New York and in Toronto. And the book is set in upstate New York. And they both loved the Swiss aspects. They loved them. They thought, this is great. Can you put in more, please? Can we see more? We want to see more Swiss. Marco's a baker, so let's put in more Swiss cookies. Let's put in Swiss dishes. Let's put in more facts about Switzerland. So Marco, I had him had him work in Interlaken for a while at the Jungfrau Victoria hotel, where I actually did a little stage, or schnupperlehr, as we would call it. I did that when I was in the 8th or 9th class, I think. So I was able to add all of these things, Mailanderli and Basel Brunzli and Spitzbuben and all Zimtsternli and all these kinds of biscuits, and Rösti, of course, the Egergletscher, and going up the Jungfraujoch and stuff like that. So it was really, really fun. And honestly, I've seen so many comments of people readers saying, oh, I love the Swiss aspect, and I really want to go and visit Switzerland now, and this sounds great. I've researched it and it's amazing, which it is. So it was so much fun to do. And initially, I have to say, I hesitated a little bit with the Swiss
why is
stuff.
that?
Well, I wasn't sure if it would land well. I wasn't sure if people would really be receptive, or if I was trying to put too much in. And it turns out, no, people are loving it. So I hope more people will discover Switzerland a little bit more through the book.
So where can people find your book?
Yes, and in bookstores, the regular independent bookstores, and but probably the easiest way is to go to either hannahmarymckinnon.com or to Holly Cassidy author.com. I have the two websites with links to either from each one. And on social media, people can find me as Hannah Mary McKinnon. I'm on, the regular ones, Instagram and Facebook, predominantly those two.
So Anna Mary, I really thank you for your time. I wish you all the best with the Christmas Countdown and all the other books. Dear listener, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you, and à bientôt.